Okay, so welcome everyone. My name's Hannah. I'm the Director of Aquatics at Water Babies. I can see some faces that joined us yesterday, so welcome back to you guys. Nice to see you again. And welcome to our people who are joining us for the first time. You're very welcome to join us, and thanks for joining in. Today we've got a session with the lovely Kate from Mini First Aid, who I will ask to introduce herself in a minute. Just before we get started, just some real quick housekeeping rules. Everybody is on mute apart from Kate and myself. That's just to keep the noise down for everybody. It can get a bit manic if we've got lots of speakers on, so everybody's on mute. You do have the opportunity to ask questions. There is a little chat option at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask us questions through the chat throughout the session, and we'll try and pick them up as we go. You're able to use grid or speaker view. So if you're on a mobile, you can just swipe to the side to change the view. If you're on a laptop, there's an option at the top of your screen to change to grid, where you can see everyone's faces, or to change to just speaker view, so you'll see who's speaking. We are going to be recording this session today, so we can pop it on our website for people to look back on if they've not seen it, or if you guys want to refresh your memory. But please don't worry, we'll only be recording the speaker view, so it'll just be my face and Kate's face that you'll be able to see. So we won't see all of your faces. So don't worry if you've got your video on, we're not going to record you. So that's fine. Okay, so let's make a start. So Kate, welcome to the session. Thank you so much for joining us. Can I ask you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Kate. I am a mum of 6. So I have a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, twins who are 3, and twins who will be 2 in a week and a half's time. I don't quite know where the time's gone. And I set up Mini First Aid about 6 years ago now, because at the time there wasn't any first aid training that was specifically for parents and carers. So you could do your work-based first aid training, which I'm sure many of you have experienced with your employer, but we needed something that was slightly more tailored to the needs of parents. And one of those things is that our parents, when they come to our classes, need to bring their babies with them. And we needed to make our classes flexible and adaptable so that people could bring babies along too. So we now run classes right across the UK. Each week we're training about 1,000 people a week in first aid, which is just fantastic. And we get life-saving stories come through. So we get messages from people saying, I've been to your class, I learned how to deal with my baby in a choking situation, and because of what I learned, I've been able to save my baby's life. And we get stories like that on a weekly basis through to our office. So we certainly have a feel-good job. And obviously we've just had to sort of reinvent the way that we're doing things at the moment because of lockdown and COVID. So we're just having to rethink about the way that we're teaching at the moment. We're teaching online and through platforms like this. So thanks for having me. And I can also say that I've got an hour off without any of my 6 children. So I said to Hannah yesterday that I might actually sit here all afternoon. If you want to stay on, I might just stay.
You're very excited about that hour off, and I don't blame you with 6 children.
I've been counting the hours since we got up early this morning. Yeah.
Bless you. So you just mentioned there about some online classes. So people don't necessarily have to attend a physical class. They can attend an online class with you.
That's right. So until lockdown, we were very much active with our public classes. People could have us to their own homes, or could go to a venue right across the UK. And obviously that had to stop straight away overnight. So we had to rethink the way that we were delivering our training. So we've got 2 different ways that at the moment you can learn first aid with Mini First Aid. The first one is that it's an online course which you can take at any time that you want to. It costs just £20 a head. And you can take that course, you can stop and start it whenever you want to. And that takes you through all of our content for our 2-hour class, with videos, with ways of checking back and doing tests to check that you've understood the instruction. The second version, if you'd rather have more dialogue with a trainer, is that we're running Zoom classes. So like we're doing today, but on a smaller scale. So you have a smaller group where everybody's unmuted and can talk to each other with the trainer. And again, that group will either be a group that's been put together by the trainer, or if you've got a group of friends, perhaps an NCT group or a group of family, and you want to link everybody together, then we can invite everybody to one Zoom group and run a class in that way. So that's what we're doing at the moment. And then when it is safe and reasonable for us to run classes again, then we'll be back out running physical classes.
Great, thank you. And how important would you say it was for parents, babysitters, grandparents to know basic first aid?
hugely important. So if you think about, obviously wherever you're watching today, you may be living somewhere rural, you might be in the middle of a city centre, but the general call out time on the average in the UK for an ambulance to arrive at the scene of an emergency for paediatrics is 12 minutes. And so that's 12 minutes that if something happens to a little one that's in your care, that's the 12 minutes that you are responsible for giving first aid. And actually, 12 minutes doesn't sound very long, but trust me, in an emergency situation, when the pressure falls to you, it can be hugely important what you do in those 12 minutes. So that's why it's so important to learn first aid, so that you know that you've got stored in here, you've got the expertise. And at Mini First Aid, we're less worried about how good you are at bandaging and doing beautiful sort of slings, etc. We're more about practical, what can you do in an emergency until the professional paramedics or medical advice arrives. And that, having that reassurance, and we hope you never have to use it, but having that, we sort of say it's like having it in your back pocket. You know it's there, you know that if you ever had to deal with it, or if you were with a friend or in a public space and somebody else was in a first aid situation, that you could be the person that steps in to save the day. So it's massively important, and massively important for grandparents as well. We've seen a huge increase, albeit at the moment everything's slightly off kilter, but in the number of grandparents that are acting as carers for babies and young children. And if I think of my parents as an example, I know they'll forgive me for saying this, but they're both in their 70s. And when we challenged them about their own first aid training, it was when my mum was in the Girl Guides. And so she was 14. So you think, actually, what you learned when you were 14 probably isn't even applicable anymore, and techniques have massively changed. So for grandparents, it's even more so. So anybody that you are going to leave in the caring for your baby or child really, really should understand the basics of first aid.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much for joining us. It's such an important subject, and we're really glad that we can kind of link up with you and bring this to our lovely customers here. If you had to give one piece of advice for a parent who was in the horrible situation of having to give first aid in an emergency situation, what would that be?
So if we were assuming that if we were talking about a critical situation where a baby wasn't breathing, is the first things first is that you need to get help. So you need to call 999. So you need to get help on the way. So you want to be dialing 999 in an emergency, or shouting for help. Or if you're with a partner or friend, that they are getting help. And then it's just taking that moment to assess the situation so that you can remember your first aid and then decide what you're going to do. It's almost the deep breath, right, this is what I've got to do, and then calling on those reserves. And I think when we talk a bit later about first aid techniques, is that we don't want to have people to feel under too much pressure to remember the numbers or remember the exact process, as long as they've got the basics of what they've got to do. And if there is anything that you need to know how to do, it's how to deal with CPR and know how to give breaths.
Great, thank you. So today I think, Kate, you're going to give us a demonstration on how to deal with choking.
Yes, that's great.
So much that we can talk about, but we're going to concentrate on choking today. But we do have the opportunity, as I said, for you to ask questions. Yes. So we will go through some questions. I think there's one just come in, so we'll start with that one.
Yeah.
Do you plan on having a course on child safety at home online? As far as I'm aware, it's only available in a lesson.
Yes, that's right. So we launched a new course, and in fact, talk about bad timing. We launched a brand new course on baby proofing just before lockdown. And this was a course where it came about because we're teaching first aid, and we almost like we had a sense of responsibility to almost offer training in making your home safer in the first place, and perhaps preventing those accidents from happening in the first place. We launched the course. It's been hugely successful in the few weeks that it was running. Loads of interest, loads of media coverage. And then we went into lockdown, and obviously we are working, as with all businesses, we're working to get everything available online. Yes, there is going to be a Zoom version of the class available. So if you want to do a baby proofing class, that is available through a Zoom interactive group. An actual self-based online learning session is still under development, but we can certainly, if you want to do the Zoom class, and we'd love to do that with you, then yes, please get in touch with Mini First Aid.
Great, thank you. So when we were chatting yesterday, Kate, you decided that choking is probably the best thing to do today. Just tell us why that is. I
think if I go back to when I had Alfie, who's my eldest, and I remember I mixed fed Alfie, so he was breastfed and he had a bottle, and I was confident with that, and I knew what I was doing. And then you get towards that 6 months and you're faced with weaning, and I felt very anxious about it. And I felt, oh my goodness, what if he chokes? I'm on my own, my husband's at work, what happens and suddenly it's this huge sense of responsibility. And I think when we talk to parents who come to our classes or come to our online classes, they say a huge motivator is, what would I do if my baby chokes? We hear a lot of cases of babies and young children that have choked, and some of those have resulted in a fatality. But actually, generally, in the majority of choking situations, the outcome can be hugely positive. You just got to know what to do. So I've got some tips to talk about around the house and about feeding your baby. If you want me, do we talk about those now? Yeah. Okay. Right. So I'm going to hold this up to camera so you can see it. This is called a choke tester, and this is something that our trainers use. And this was, it's actually designed by a company called Fred Safety, and it was designed in partnership with the organisations that organise the EN71 testing for child toys, child safety. So if you've ever when you've bought your baby a toy and on the tag it says EN71 and you've got your heart mark, that's to show you that that baby toy is safe for the under 3s, or it will say no, it will say 0 to 3 with a cross through it if it's not deemed safe. And basically this is what they use, a device like this, to see that if something can fit inside this device, then it is a choking hazard, and therefore it is not suitable for somebody under the age of 3. So that's what happens when we buy toys. And generally as parents, we would select a toy that we say, actually, we want something that's suitable for their age and for them to use. However, at home, little ones can get their hands on everything. And I've got this lovely selection down here by my feet, which I'm going to pick up and show you. And particularly in our house where we've got a mixed age group. So we've got very little ones and then I've got older children. And just things are around at home. And so we've used this, or knowing about this size, is that we've been able to have a think about what's lying around at home. You're talking about down this long side here, if I hold that to camera, down the long side here is about 5 centimetres. And then your diameter across the top there is about 3 centimetres. And if you have a look, it's on an angle. And the reason it's on an angle is that's to mimic the back of the gullet. So anything that can fit in here or be squashed into here is a potential choking risk. So let me show you some things just to think about. I've got some coins. So, and it took me a while to find some coins actually in our house today, because nowhere's using coins at the moment. Everywhere's contactless, but I did find some coins, and luckily they weren't down the back of our sofa. But if I show you here, that's a 2p piece, and that fits in there, 50p piece. And this will fit in a £2 coin. So even though when you think about a £2 coin being quite a large item, that fits in to a choke tester and potentially could pose a choking risk. So that's some coins. And then I've got a little 20p here, even though it's got the rough different shapes, that will also fit. So that's so coins. So think about your sofas at home. Put your hands down the back of the sofa. I know at the moment everyone's locked down. Perhaps homes aren't as clean as we'd like them to be. I know mine certainly. I have to sort of shut my eyes before I lift the sofa cushions, what I'm going to find. But it's really important, particularly if you've got little ones that are just starting to get on the move and explore. Hands down the side of the sofa, under the sofa. If you or your partner or visitors to the house have a place where they keep coins, perhaps it's in a tray by the side of the bed, anything that's in the reach of babies needs to go out of the way. Let me show you some other things as well. You hear a lot in the press about button batteries, which are the ones that go in some small toys. They're supposed to be locked in, as in they're supposed to be screwed in. But actually, look at this for a choking risk. That's a AAA battery there, and that fits in as a choking risk. So whilst we're always focusing on those little button batteries, which is important to do so, don't rule out larger batteries as well at home being a choking risk. I've got here, this is a balloon. Now, my children, pre-lockdown, were going to birthday parties like it was going out of fashion. Their social life is significantly better than mine. And they come out of a party, and nearly always in the bottom of children's party bags is a balloon to be blown up. Have a look at that going into the choke tester there. So if you have a child coming home from a party, just double check those party bags for choking hazards, and certainly just be mindful of these, or particularly if they've burst and then you find them lying around at home, because the rubber itself can form a really quite significant choking hazard. What else have I got here? Right, let's show you. This was an interesting one. I thought this was quite interesting. At home, some of you may have corner protectors. That's a clear one, but corner protectors, see that's flexible on the corner of units. Make sure really that you have a firm one that doesn't bend, because if you have these flexy ones, look at that, they actually form a choking hazard. So what you've done something at home to prevent an accident from happening, you've put it onto the corner of a unit, but because the tape in it has worked its way loose, or it's got a big wobbly, or a little person has regularly shaken it up and down and it's worked its way off, that in itself can make an airtight seal in the gullet. So be really, really careful when you're thinking about, and in fact, if you do our baby proofing course, we talk more about some of the better buys for home safety products, but certainly anything that's flexible. There's also this sort of stuff which you might have seen that you can put on steps or around the edge of fireplaces. I'm busy doing it on my desk here, you can't see, but you can put that on the edge of fireplace, and it's great because if a little one goes in head first into a fireplace, but it's made of foam and they can bite it. So again, you're actually better with a fabric or a type of material that can't be broken or ingested. So that's just some of the things to think about around the home. So I challenge you, you're going to hate me for this, but after you get off today's call, get on your hands and knees, have a look under the sofa, in the nursery, playroom, wherever you are, and just have a look for things that you think, actually, crikey, that 3 centimetres, it could fit inside my baby's windpipe. And we know that babies explore by putting things in their mouths. So by putting things in their mouths, that's their way of sensing things, which is great, but obviously then that poses you risk then as a choking hazard. Let me talk to you about food, because when you start to wean babies, I'm peeling a banana here, this is my banana. When you start to wean babies, all I say to parents when they come on our courses is that weaning should be so much fun. It should be lovely. But if you're very anxious, then your baby's going to pick up on that as well. And so when we get asked at Mini First Aid, should you use baby-led weaning or should you spoon feed your baby? My genuine answer, as a first aider, but also as a parent who's been there and done it quite a number of times now, is to really go with the step technique that you feel most comfortable with. Just to give you an example of my eldest 2 children, my eldest son, he, when we were weaning him, used to sit in his high chair with his hands just swinging down the side. He didn't even want to touch food. He was quite happy for somebody to spoon it into his mouth. And yet my daughter wouldn't let a spoon go anywhere near her mouth. She wanted to do all the feeding herself. So she wanted to do it herself. And so I very naturally ended up with a spoon-fed baby and a baby that we use baby-led weaning. And both of them now, as children that are both in junior school, are both eating proficiently, and there's no difference between them. So I think the most important thing to remember from a first aid perspective and from a parenting perspective is that you've got to go with what you feel comfortable with. But I'm going to talk to you about, if you are giving your baby food to hold, there are some key things to remember. So I've got a banana here just to show you, and if I slice a banana and show you my disc of banana. There we go, there's my disc of banana. Have a look now at my choke tester. And discs of any type of food, let's show you, can pose a choking hazard because that's the perfect shape to go into the windpipe or be accidentally inhaled into the windpipes. If I pop that in the choke tester there, that's very nice. I haven't had enough lunch. So if you're thinking about how preparing food to be safe for babies to hold in their hands, first things first, I've got my baby here under here. This is my mannequin baby. This is not a real baby, but my baby here, see the size of her fist? Think about giving her items to hold that are at least the size of her fist, because that will give her a good opportunity to get hold of it. And there's less risk of that going into her mouth hole and getting stuck. The other thing to think about is to think about cutting items into long, thin strips. So you may or may not have seen this technique done with a banana before, and there's always a risk when you do this live on camera that it might go, there we go, look. So bananas break into segments like that, and that is a much safer way of giving a baby or a young child a piece of banana because it's long and straight so they can hold it. and it's less of a choking risk. If you think about feeding your baby sausages, perhaps when they're chewing a little bit more proficiently, again, cutting lengthways rather than in round circles. And also, if you're thinking about giving them grapes, larger blueberries, anything like that needs to be cut lengthways. Cherry tomatoes, you don't want anything that could fit and cover across the windpipe. The other thing that's really, really important, as well as cutting or breaking food into manageable pieces, is to make sure that little ones are always sitting down when they eat. And the reason that you need them to sit down is, one is that posture-wise, if I turn sideways, that's the best position to be in to chew and digest, to travel down into the stomach, but also it means you can keep your eyes on them. So if a child is seated to eat, and we have a rule in our house, which is that if you want something to eat, and I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing at the moment, they just seem to be eating like machines in our house at the moment. They're constantly hungry. But the deal is, yes, you can have something to eat, but you have to sit on your bottom to eat where I can see you. So we have that rule is really, really important to make sure that children are sitting down. They don't run around with food. If they're in an environment where there's another child or another sibling present and somebody bashes into them whilst they're carrying a biscuit, play groups are probably the worst offenders for these, is it can cause a big choking risk. So it's really important that children sit down to eat. And then finally, as well as sitting down, it's really, really important that children chew their food properly. Because as adults, and we know that children copy us, they look at what we're doing and then to sort of mimic our behaviours, we have a habit of inhaling our food. So you think of, I don't know, we had spaghetti bolognese for tea last night, and it's very easy to just shovel it because you don't need to chew it that much. But actually, if I've got my 2-year-old or my nearly 2-year-old watching me, it's really important that they see me moving my mouth. I look such a wally on camera doing this, but really chewing, because that chewing moves the food around the mouth, mashes it with their gums or their teeth, and then allows it to pass down into the gullet safely. So it's really important to encourage them to chew. And so sitting on the bottoms, chopping and breaking the food and chewing properly. And we say to parents and carers, be the best demonstrators. So there is no point in you standing up at breakfast time, merrily eating something, standing up and not really chewing it particularly fast. And then you're saying to your child, sit down. Sit down. So if you can, and I appreciate that parents are always going to be under a little bit of pressure, but if you can and you can have that time where you're sitting with them, it's hugely safer and it pays you back massive dividends in safety at home. So that's the sort of the safety side of things to make sure, because if you follow those key guides, then actually that can avoid choking situations. But as you know, you will have read in the press with cases, is that choking can happen. And one of the things that is given to us by Mother Nature is we have something called a gag reflex. So if you put something too far to the back of your tongue, it makes you gag, that sensation you get before you're going to vomit. And for little ones, the gag reflex is a lot further forward, and that's very deliberate, because that's how they're exploring the world, watching a baby on the floor over there, that they're exploring the world. So they're trying and putting things in their mouths. And so that gag reflex is pushing things back out if they're not meant to go in. So because we have that gag reflex, that's our body's natural way of preventing us from choking. However, sometimes something just goes the wrong way, and that could be something like I showed you, a coin, or it could be a piece of food, a sweet. And so it's really important that you know what to do in a choking situation. So Hannah, if it's okay now, shall we show the demonstration now? Okay, yeah, right. So I'm going to show you 2 demonstrations for dealing with choking. I'm going to show you with a baby. So this baby is under 1, and then I'm also going to show you for a child. So for those of you whose little ones are over the age of 1, I'm going to show you what to do. If you've got a pen, you might want to scribble these notes down, but also we'll make sure that we circulate via our mini first aid social channels. We've got a little visual that you can screen save on your phones, which actually tells you all the numbers and what you've got to remember with dealing with a choking baby and child. So if my baby is choking, first things first, she's not going to be making any noise because her windpipe is blocked. So if my baby is crying, coughing and spluttering, very red, that means she's gagging, and gagging is a good thing. So yes, we might want to encourage her to cough a little bit more, but she is not choking. If she is choking, she will not be able to make any noise. She'll be silent. So again, just going back to what I was saying just now about making sure they're sitting down and you're sitting with them. If your baby was in another room or you'd left the room while they were eating, because they go silent when they're choking, you're not going to be able to hear them. So my baby here is choking because she's silent. I can't hear any breath. And actually, my baby's lips have started to turn blue. Babies don't have great circulation in their lips, fingers and toes, so quite often they'll change colour if they're cold, but also if they're not breathing, then this is going to, their lips are going to turn blue very quickly. So what I need to do is make sure, and again, we talked about what are those things to remember if it was an emergency, what are the key things to remember? First of all, you need to be able to get your baby out of their high chair quickly. So practice the straps. Don't leave it till it's an emergency situation to suddenly be fumbling and trying to work out how to do the straps. So you undo the baby straps, you get her out of her high chair. And what we want to do is we want to turn our baby, just make sure she's on camera. We want to turn our baby onto her front, and supporting her chest, I want to bang my baby on the back between her shoulder blades. Now, when I'm banging on the back or slapping on the back, I'm going to do it up to 5 times, and I'm going to hit her really hard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, when we do this demo in classes, quite often we find that parents wince a little bit because the pressure is so intense that you're doing across those shoulder blades there. But that back blows are so effective that you will find in most choking situations that just by doing that, the object's going to come out. And we get parents reporting back to us after courses that that's happened and delivering back blows as it has worked. Health visitor said to me when Alfie was small, if you don't leave a bruise in a choking situation, then you've not hit them hard enough. So it's really that impact there. It's a nice, safe part of the body. You're not going to do any damage there. You've got their head supported and you're going to hit them on the back up to 5 times. If my baby has stopped, so if the object has come out, what's my baby going to do now? Well, she's upside down, so she's probably going to be sick. She's probably going to cry because she's not going to be hugely impressed that mummy's got her out of her high chair and turned her upside down and hit her hard. But crying in first aid terms is good, is great. However, in some situations, babies, the object doesn't come out with the back. So perhaps it's really tightly lodged and it doesn't come out with those back slaps. So you notice now I've turned my baby over so that she's front up and she's still head down. So she's on an angle there. So she's head down. And I'm going to take 2 fingers. This is in the same way as that we would deliver CPR to a baby. And we're going to press vigorously in the center of her chest between her nipples. Now, if you've got someone there to practice on, one of the ways to describe it, don't practice on a baby, but you can practice on another person, is if you poke somebody like you don't like them very much, that's the technique. It's jabbing them. Excuse me, get out of my way. And I know at the moment we can't touch anybody, but if you've got somebody at home, that's the sensation. Somebody you don't like very much. So you can give them a firm jab, and it's that jab into the center of the chest that we're doing up to 5 times. And you hear the air coming out, and that's because what you're doing is you're actually forcing air from the diaphragm up the windpipe and pushing against the back of that object, and that should dislodge your object and get your object out. Now, yes.
Sorry, quick question. We've got a question from Natasha. Could you show how you're supporting baby's chin on the back slaps?
Yes.
Just off camera.
So just like that. So if I'll just sit her up so you can see. So she's just like that. So it's just so that what you don't want is you don't want the neck taking any of the impact. You want that all to be held quite firmly. And actually, if I could take her down, but she'd be off camera. But if you have her on your lap, then your knees then supporting as well. So it's just making sure you've got a firm grip here under the chin, so that you've got baby like that. So we've done 5 back slaps. The object didn't come out. And then we've done the 5 jabs into, these are called abdominal thrusts, into the chest there to move that object out. There's a question come through. Does somebody want to see something again?
Could you please repeat the front facing thing again? I think maybe if you could just go over both of them again. That
yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So let's do that again. So we've turned baby. I'm just going to push my chair back a bit so you can see. So baby here, she's on her front and I've supported her neck and I'm going to give her up to 5 back blows. She's facing down and she's in a downwards position because then gravity is going to help me out as well. So up to 5 times between the shoulder blades. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So really firm back blows. In this situation, that hasn't been effective enough because the object is still lodged. So I've turned her onto her back, so her stomach is now facing up. I'm supporting the back of her head. See, I've got the back of her head there. I'm going to take 2 fingers, so 2 fingers into the center of the chest between the nipples, and I'm going to jab in an 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that okay? If anyone needs to see it again. We okay? Good. Okay. So with those 2 motions, so the back slaps and the abdominal thrusts, you work in cycles of 5, and you just keep going until either the object comes out or emergency help arrives. So it's also very important in a choking situation that you're getting emergency help. So you're shouting for help, calling 999, and then continuing with your dealing with your choking situation. Now, with regards to taking babies to hospital if there's been a choking situation, if you have called 999 and then the object comes out, the chances are that they will still send an ambulance to come and check over baby. However, if you haven't got as far as calling 999 because you've gone straight in with those back blows and the object has come out, you don't need to take a baby to hospital who's just had the back blows delivered on the back, unless you want to. So if the object has come out and you've just hit them on the back, then you are absolutely fine to keep them at home. However, you may want to seek medical advice. But if you have done the abdominal thrust, so that's the 2 fingers in the center of the chest with that aggressive pushing down, if you've done that and the object comes out, you must take your baby to hospital. It's really, really important because in this part of the body, there's a lot going on for all of us, but particularly for babies because everything's all squashed in here together. And if we've applied quite aggressive pressure to this area here, there's a risk that we might have damaged something. Nothing that can't be repaired, but obviously what we would need to happen is we'd need baby to have a chest x-ray. So in a choking situation, if you've done the chest thrust, even if it's successful, baby must go to hospital to be checked out.
We've got another question, Kate, from Kate. Would you suggest just doing 1 round of back blows and then move into the chest, or 1 round of back, 1 round of chest, and then repeat?
So so you do your 5 back blows, then your 5 chest thrusts, and you keep working in cycles of 5. So 5 on the back, 5 on the chest, 5 on the back, 5 on the chest, until either the object comes out, emergency help arrives, or if your baby falls unconscious at that point, you would need to deliver CPR. Now, we do get asked, would you give breath to a baby whose windpipe was blocked? And the answer is yes, we would, because you might be able to get some air past a blockage, even in a choking situation.
So Natasha said, do you have to get oxygen into them? So that would be...
Yes, yes, absolutely. Can I show you on a child just so that we can see? So for those of you who are watching who have got babies or young children over the age of 1, so this is my mannequin here. If you're thinking, oh my goodness, I've only got a little one and this mannequin seems ginormous, he's about 6 in size, if you're thinking he's huge. But let me just show you what you do with the babies. This is once they've hit their first birthday, we change our technique for dealing with choking. Now the good news is the numbers are exactly the same. So you haven't got to remember any different numbers. It's just those 5s that you've got to remember, and also getting your emergency help. Little ones, as they get older, can help you out a bit though. So one thing is that they might actually be able to tell you that they're choking by banging the table or hitting you or doing something to draw your attention to the fact that something is blocked. The other thing is you'll find that it's more likely that a child is going to start to try and cough to dislodge the item themselves. And I'm going to remind this little boy that he can cough. Will you cough for me? Give me a cough. Give me a cough. Show him how to cough. Because just by coughing might be enough to dislodge that item. Now, if it's not, we're going to deliver those back blows again. So in exactly the same way as we did with our baby, supporting his head and leaning him forward. Obviously, it depends on the size of your child. You might be able to physically lift them up. You might have to kneel behind them, depending on how tall they are. But I'll just stand so that you can see this on camera. Let's get this the right way. So we're going to have him leaning down, using the heel of my hand between the shoulder blades. It's going to be particularly loud because he's made of plastic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 blows firmly on the back between the shoulder blades to get that object out. Now, if that object hasn't come out, we're moving on to those chest thrusts. And I remember on a baby, we did it with our 2 fingers. we've got more abdomen to play with here once they get a bit bigger. So we're doing a slightly different manoeuvre. Now, if you've heard of the Heimlich manoeuvre, that's what it was previously known. It's called a abdominal thrust. If you get your hand, and you might want to do this along with me now, into the shape of a fist, and you see your top knuckle there, that bit there is going to go into the chest between the bottom of the rib cage and his belly button. So I've pressed that in, and then I've put my other hand over the top. So I've got him round the waist, but with that pressed in. And the motion that I'm doing is I'm scooping aggressively upwards. And I say aggressively because we need to put some force into that movement to force the air up to the diaphragm and out through the windpipe. So the way that I describe this in classes is imagine that you're scooping ice cream, but it's really stiff ice cream. It hasn't been out the freezer for long enough. So it's really stiff ice cream, and you're in a bad mood. So we're really aggressively serving ice cream. So that bit of knuckle between the bottom of the ribs and your belly button, put your hand over, and we're going to do this. And we're going to squeeze in and lift. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that movement works in exactly the same way as it did with the 2 fingers with the baby. It's just different. So the same thing applies with babies over the age of 1 going to hospital. If you've had to deliver back blows and the object comes out, that's great. You don't have to go to hospital. However, if you have delivered those abdominal or Heimlich manoeuvre thrusts, then you do need to take child to hospital to get them checked out afterwards. And it's really important in a choking situation that once you've started dealing with a choking situation, you also need to get help. So whether that's that you're physically carrying your baby or child whilst doing the back slaps, or you're shouting for help, and then when you ring 999, if you put 999 on speaker, then the guys at the emergency response unit will talk you through what you've got to do. So today is about seeing the technique. We'd encourage you, when you're able to get to a class, you can actually have a practice, but then you can be reminded by telephone when you ring 999 what you're actually doing.
Thank you, Kate. We've got another question from Lois. So when do you call emergency services? After 1 set of back blows and chest thrusts? Yes,
yeah, that's right. So we want to do, and the reason for that is because it is thought that by the medical professionals that the back blows themselves are so effective that might be enough to get that object out. And of course, we want to get oxygen into baby or child as quickly as possible. So it might just be that doing back blows, and then you don't actually need an ambulance because you managed to get the object out. So it's really important to do that first round and then get your emergency help. But obviously, if you've got somebody at home with you, as many of us will at the moment, shouting for help, baby's choking, ring 999, don't hesitate, because you can always say to your emergency responder, it's okay, we've dealt with it, it's sorted. They're not going to tell you off for ringing 999 by mistake. So yes, your first round before you get that emergency help.
I think remember that 12 minutes, it's a long time, isn't it, when you're in that?
It is, yeah, absolutely.
Tamsin's asked, what do you do if a child gets something stuck up their nose?
Right, okay, so as a first aider, you don't do anything. So if a child gets something stuck at their nose, and they all do it, raisins, frozen peas, bits of Lego, tiny bits of Lego, I'm just recounting all the things in our house. They have a special technique in accident emergency for getting the objects out, and it actually can involve the parent being involved, because they actually do something where they blow through the child's mouth. But it's a technique that a medical professional needs to supervise you doing. So if something is stuck in the nose, unless you can see it and you can massage it out, then you don't touch it. You take them for some medical advice and get the medical professionals to remove it. Please don't stick anything up your child's nose, tweezers, cotton buds, etc. You don't want to risk pushing it further or causing any damage.
Artie says, sometimes my little one eats papers, labels, etc. Do we have to get them out?
Not as long as they don't go down the windpipe. Then if they go into the stomach, then they're going to work their way through the digestive system. You need to be cautious with what you've got around at home, because I'm totally with you there. Little ones will eat anything. One of my youngest twins is partial to the newspaper, and you know that she's had, because it's like her face has gone, and you're like, where's she found the newspaper? So you do need to be cautious. And again, I think that's probably more in the around doing the prevention around the home, making sure that papers, things like that, are out of reach so that they can't eat it in the first place. The first aid situation is really if it went to the windpipe, so was a choking situation. If it's digested, what you can always do is ring your health visitor or your GP and say, they've eaten this, it's not a food item, should I be concerned, what do I need to look for? And they'll probably get you to keep an eye on their number 2s until it appears the other end.
Lovely, thank you for that. Has anybody else got any more questions? If you do, please pop them in the chat box and we can ask Kate while she's here. There's so much to cover, isn't there? You could be here talking about this. Somebody's asked, how long does it take for choking to cause a serious damage?
Varies between child to child. There is no set. You don't want a baby to be more than a couple of minutes without oxygen to the brain, but it does really vary because it's the size of the baby, their current whether they're a well child in the first place, whether they have any other underlying health conditions. So we really don't want to have a baby without oxygen, full stop. That's the thing, and that's why it's so important with first aid to know that you're treating a situation as quickly as possible so that time is absolutely minimised.
Great, thank you. We've got a question from Tams and I'll come back to that one. So Megan's just asked, during back blows or abdominal thrusts, what further signs should we look for if our little one was to fall unconscious?
So if baby has fallen unconscious, what's going to happen is baby's going to go floppy. So whereas she would have had some sort of more of muscle structure and be holding herself, once she's fallen unconscious, she's no longer going to be able to be aware of you. You won't be able to get a response from her. One of the things that you can do to see if your baby's responding is give her a pinch on the earlobe or a tickle on the toes to see if her reflexes are working, but she'll suddenly become floppy as if she's fallen asleep. So she's gone floppy, and that's the point where once we know she's unconscious, that we're not going to continue with our back blows and our chest thrusts, that we're actually going to deliver CPR. Okay,
so back to Tamsin's question, how do you deal with wasp and bee stings?
Right, okay, so wasps and bee stings. So I don't know whether anyone else is experiencing this at home at the moment, but there's a lot of very tired bees. So they're lying on the ground. So we keep finding them in the grass, which is a nightmare for little feet, especially little bare feet walking around. The key thing with a sting is to make sure that you don't pull the stinger out with a pair of tweezers. And the reason for that is that if you use tweezers, then you could potentially, the actual venom from the wasp or the bee is actually in the end of the sting itself. So imagine that's your stinger. If I got that with a pair of tweezers, I'm actually going to squeeze that venom into the wound. So actually what you want to do is, first of all, is get baby child sitting down so that you can see it and examine it. Make sure your hands are clean, if necessary, wearing gloves. And you want to flick out the item. So have I got a card? Let's have a quick look. Just imagine you've got a credit card, debit card out of your wallet, your Tesco club card. You want to scrape it over the sting, and that takes the sting with it and leaves the venom in the sting and not in the child. And then afterwards you want a nice cold compress, so either one that you're keeping in the fridge or some ice wrapped in paper. I've got a cold compress here, look. And you just hold your cold compress, and that's enough then to relieve the pain from the sting. Now, generally, once the sting is out and you've had a cold compress, you shouldn't get any further problems, but keep an eye, because some children have allergic reactions to stings. So keep an eye on the area if it gets very red and raised, or your child is behaving or acting in a way that's not usual for them, or they become a little bit drowsy, or they're sick, then it's definitely worth, or any difficulty breathing, you definitely need to seek medical advice.
Great, thank you for useful information. Janine's asked, can you talk about secondary drowning after a near drowning incident?
Right, okay. So with secondary drowning, it is if there has been a near drowning incident, there are cases where the drowning can take place at a later stage. And so with that, it is absolutely imperative that you monitor a child after you've had a near drowning incident. So it's not just accepting that, you know, because I think if you've been in that situation and it's been terribly frightening and everybody's relieved, and then you that's where you hear documented cases of where it's happened latterly, or it's happened at a later time. So it's really, really important to continue to monitor the child, and that's why after a near drowning incident we always recommend medical advice and medical inspection of a baby or a child that's been involved in a near drowning incident.
Great, thank you. Mina and Isha have asked, can they choke on water?
Yes, you can, but water can be cleared. So it tends to be, so you can still use your back blows, but what you tend to find with a liquid, quite often you'll find that parents will ask this with particularly very young babies with milk, etc., is that they will ask and say, it can't block the airway because it's a liquid item, so it can't block, but what can happen is you can encourage it to move out because it's going to be uncomfortable. So encouraging them to cough, or you can use back blows to get liquid out.
Great, thank you. Becky has asked, when would you give breaths to give them oxygen? During back blows or chest thrusts, or when they're unconscious and starting CPR anyway?
Yes, so that's when you would give breaths. So you give breaths as part of CPR. So you don't get involved in giving breaths. Your priority in a choking situation is to get that object out. And then if the object is out, you therefore wouldn't need to give breaths. But if they fall unconscious, that's the point where you start to give your breaths.
Okay, Nicola's asked, can you go over CPR? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, of course we can. Yeah, that's fine. So we were chatting yesterday. Hannah and I were chatting yesterday about CPR on Zoom, and one of the challenges, I guess, that I have as a first aider is that because I can't see everybody at the moment, if people were having a go or practicing along, as a first aider, I can't supervise it as well. So I'll give this as an information give, but I would thoroughly recommend that you book yourself on to do some first aid training, either with the online course or with a Zoom class where the trainer can actually see your technique, etc., and see what you're doing, just because you've got me on camera. First of all, one
tip, sorry, just to say, if anybody wants to see Kate slightly bigger, if you click on the 3 dots on her picture, you can pin the video, and I think that'll make it slightly bigger for you. It might be slightly easier for you to see the techniques.
Brilliant. Great. So first things first, this is my baby who's under the age of 1. And if I need to see if my baby, first of all, I need to check I'm not in any danger, but I also need to see if my baby's responding. So I need to see if I can get a reaction from her. So that might be by tickling the toes, pinching her earlobe, talking to her, hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? And using her name, obviously, if she's a child that's known to me. So I can't get a response from this baby, so she's unconscious. What I need to do now is I need to open her airway. And to open the airway on a baby, I've got her in my arms here, sorry, not on a flat platform, is that I need to tilt her head back. So 2 fingers under the chin, tilting the head back. When you open that airway, that means that should the tongue have blocked the windpipe, by tilting the head backwards, very gently, tilting the head backwards, opens the airway. So I've opened the airway, and I now need to see if she's breathing. And the way that I discover if my baby is breathing is by using several senses. So first of all, I'm going to listen. So I'm going to put my ear near to her mouth so that I can hear if she is breathing. I'm also looking down the chest to see if her chest is rising and falling. And sometimes on a very little baby, that will look like their tummy, because that bit there is all very small and close together. So I'm looking to see if that is rising and falling. And I'm also seeing if I can feel the breath on my cheek. That's so much better than just looking. So I need to do all that there for 10 seconds. To be absolutely sure. The reason we do for 10 seconds is sometimes if babies have gone to sleep and they're lying very still, some of you may have experienced this, that you go into your baby's nursery and they do that thing and you think, oh my goodness, they're so still, they're not breathing. And then they do that thing where they're just having a lovely dream and they've just turned that their breathing has gone very shallow because they're asleep. So it's really important to check for 10 seconds just to check if baby's breathing before you were to start CPR. Now in this situation, I've checked my baby, so I've checked her response, opened her airway and checked for breathing, and she's not breathing. So I need to give my baby CPR. And the first thing that I need to do is I'm going to need to give her breath, which means I'm going to need to put my mouth onto her mouth. Now, we're being asked a lot about this at the moment with COVID, about infection control and mouth on mouth. But I think in the context of where we are today, I think it's important to say that if it is your own child, it is likely, one, that you're going to know as to whether that child is an infection risk to you, but also I think most parents or carers would say that they wouldn't hesitate but to give breaths. But we do have to mention it at the moment because obviously it is an infection risk with COVID, putting your mouth onto the mouth of a baby. So you can use a CPR mask. But obviously your preference, it's important to give breath rather than to avoid it. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to breathe into our baby's mouth, and we're going to need to breathe into our baby's mouth 5 times. And I'm going to do this by putting my mouth over her mouth and nose, and I'm blowing gently. Now, if you think about blowing out birthday cake candles, really gentle breath. She's only got a tiny set of lungs, so I don't need to give great ginormous breaths. Just think about blowing out birthday cake candles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I give 5 breaths. The next thing I need to do is I need to give chest compressions. Now, remember when we were talking about choking just now, and we talked about those 2 fingers on the chest? If you draw an imaginary line from the armpits across your baby's chest, and between the nipples, we're going to press down 30 times, and we're pressing down firmly, and we're pressing down quickly because we want to mimic a beating heart, because we're going to move the blood that we've just oxygenated round the body. Now I'm going to move her down slightly. I just need to keep an eye on camera because she would need to be on a firm surface to make sure that you're getting the give back. For you're not getting any you're not sinking her into a soft surface, for example. So she needs to be on the floor, on a desk, etc. So people ask us, can I give CPR on a mattress? The answer is no, you need to have her on a firm surface. So I'm going to press down 30 times. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. After I've done those 30 compressions, the next thing I need to do is return to breath. So you remember how we put our mouth over their mouth and nose? And this time we're only going to do 2 breaths. 1, 2, and we return to 30 compressions. And we work between 30 and 2, 30 and 2, 30 and 2. So it's only at the beginning that we give 5 breaths. And the reason that we give 5 breaths at the beginning for babies and young children is because it's highly likely that the reason that they've stopped breathing is a respiratory issue rather than a cardiac issue, so their heart. So therefore, it's most important to do those breaths first. And that's also, in the case of drowning, that's also what you would need to do. So 5 breaths, followed by 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, and you just keep going until either your baby starts to breathe or medical help arrives. Now, when we're in classes, quite often parents will say to us, what if I forget the numbers? How am I going to remember that it's 5 and then 30 and 2 and 30 and 2? So watching this video back, coming to a class will just help you really embed those numbers. But the most important thing to be reassured about is it's the technique, but also it's the rough numbers. So if you were doing 30 chest compressions and you thought, oh my goodness, I've got to 32, or have I done 28? It doesn't matter, because the most important thing is that you are giving those chest compressions. So don't panic too much about those numbers. The Resus Council, who are the body that govern the instruction of giving CPR, they give that guidance because that's what's known to work best with the anatomy of the body. However, if you slip the numbers slightly, the fact that you are still doing CPR is more important than the fact that you've lost count of your numbers. So just to remind you on those numbers, if your baby's not breathing, we give breaths first, 5 breaths, then 30 chest compressions, then 2 breaths, then 30 compressions, 2 breaths, and we just keep going.
Kate, you said you had a graphic with those numbers on. Perhaps we can share on our channels as well, so people can.
Yeah, we'll get the graphics over to you, so we'll pop them on because they're really good. If you see them then on Facebook or Instagram, you can literally take a screenshot of them. You've got them. It's on your phone. At our classes, we actually have little magnets that stick on the fridge, just so that you've got, even if it's just that every time you open the fridge, you can glance at it, or you're looking through your photos in the evening, like we all do after our kids have gone to bed, and you just keep getting that refresher. But I was going to say, Hannah, that I'm conscious that there's always lots of questions with first aid, and if anybody wants to contact us after today's session through our social channels, it's at Mini First Aid, and I'm more than happy to take questions. Just bear with me for 2 reasons. One is that I'm managing an army of 6 at home, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, it's full on, and also we need to make sure that if you are in an emergency first aid situation, you don't ring a first aider to get their advice, you ring 999. So if you're in any situation, you always ring the emergency services as your first call. And also it's important to emphasise at the moment that the A&Es are very much open. So please don't keep babies at home if you think they need to go to hospital. Go with your gut instinct. And if you get to your local hospital, you will find that the COVID sections are completely separate. So you are at no heightened risk, or your baby is at any heightened risk of contracting COVID because you've gone to hospital. So put priority on baby or child and make sure you get them to hospital in an emergency situation. Don't hold back. Paediatricians have been in contact with us saying, please encourage parents still to come, because they have seen a drop off and then children coming in perhaps later when they're a lot more poorly.
Great, thank you. I think we'll just do a few more questions if that's still okay.
Yeah, of course it is, yeah.
So Kate said to start breaths if the baby is not breathing. What if they're breathing but not breathing normally?
Right, okay. So as long as they are breathing, then that's where we would need to take medical advice. So there is there are different types of breathing where you check for a response first of all, and check that you have breaths. But if they're not breathing normally, it's difficult to diagnose because I'm not a medic, but also without knowing what the situation is, because it could be that it's the last couple of breaths before they stopped breathing, and in which case then you would start CPR. But the most important thing is you ring 999.
Great, thank you. Were the rescue breaths over the mouth and nose? Yes, they were, weren't they?
Yeah, they were indeed. For a baby, yes. When you move over to a child, you can pinch their nose and put your mouth just over their mouth. But on a baby, that bit of their face is so little, it's most important that you put your mouth over the whole lot.
And Megan's asked, do you need to create a seal when giving breaths? It seems quite difficult to do so over the nose as well as the mouth.
Yeah, you do. And that's a couple of reasons. One is that you don't want to waste your breath, so you don't want it going out the sides, but also you want the breath to be going into baby, so you need to be able to see then that the chest is filling up with the air that you're giving through those breaths.
Okay, so Bronwyn's asked, last time I did a first aid course, it was mentioned to never put ice on a head wound. Can I please check that as the same, or has the advice changed?
Right, okay, so you shouldn't put ice anywhere direct on any skin. Because it could risk causing a skin burn. You're fine to have something cool, a compress, which can have ice in it, that is wrapped. That's absolutely fine, but it does need to be wrapped. So it's absolutely right. The advice is still that you wouldn't just put something direct, take it out the freezer and put it straight on. You need to put a barrier between. Refrigerated is generally better rather than frozen. But if you are going to use something out the freezer, is making sure you've got a barrier between that and the child's head.
Okay, Artie has asked, well, my little one falls off when standing up and sometimes gets bumps on the head. When is this going to be a serious issue, and what do we do? Okay, so it might never be a serious issue. Children are amazingly bendy, so they are designed to fall over and go splat all the time. And if you haven't had some sort of egg lump on the head by the time that they're a toddler, then that's amazing, because generally I think for most little ones that tends to happen. So just to talk you through what you need to do, first of all, baby bumps their head. A lump on the head is a very natural thing, and that means that all the fluid is rushing to where the accident has happened, and it's almost forming a protection. So a bump out is a good thing, and in fact we need to be more concerned if it's a bump inward. So you can very gently check the skull by applying very gentle pressure with your fingertips. If there's any dips in, that's more concern, because that could be damage to the skull. But lump out and a bruise, they don't look very pretty. I remember when Alfie did his, the doctor told me I just had to brush his fringe over it so that nobody could, because it was just like there. But what you need to do, again, remember my cool pack, get your cool pack out the fridge, or you can use kitchen roll under a cold tap, and you want to
hold it onto the bump. And you want to hold it really for 5 to 10 minutes, 10 minutes if you can, because that gives you time. Give baby a cuddle, read a story, put the TV on, because that gives you a time then to monitor if they are going to be affected by concussion. And the signs of concussion are being sick, suddenly falling asleep, being very drowsy, slurred words, which can be tricky with a toddler, I appreciate, anything where they're not behaving as they would normally behave. And in that case, you need to take them to hospital, because in case they have concussion, and that needs to be treated. But as a rule, generally head bumps, children will go through their lives getting lots of bumps to the head. So the most important thing is just remembering that 10 minutes of sitting down and reassuring them, giving them a cuddle, and holding a cold compress.
Great. I think the last question is, how do you manage stress when an emergency situation happens? You might get clumsy or scared.
You absolutely, and I think it's a very emotive subject, isn't it? Because I think it's all fine when you're practicing on mannequins and you're talking about what if scenarios, and then suddenly it's your very precious baby, or perhaps it's your friend's baby and you're there as well, and I think the one thing that does help you in a stressful situation is if you've got the knowledge. Because the panic is generally when people say, I don't know what to do. And we will quite often get people that come onto our classes, and the reason that they've attended is because they've been in a first aid situation where they didn't know what to do. And that is what caused the stress and the panic. So remembering that you've got to ring 999, you've got somebody on the end of the phone who will talk you through it, what you're doing, but you've been on a first aid course and learnt those techniques. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to learn first aid, because that will massively help the stress levels. Is it going to take the stress levels away? No. So that would be unfair of me to even say that. I'm a mum too, and I know that when my children have been injured and I'm a first aider and well trained in first aid, practice, and when it's my little ones, I still worry. So I think it's almost better to be a little bit on tenterhooks, because that means that you're not being complacent about something, about an accident. But I think the main thing is if you can be reassured that in that back pocket that we talked about at the beginning of the session, that you know what you're doing, really important.
Definitely. We do have one more question, or two more questions. Somebody has asked about burns. Can you give us a little bit of advice about burns?
Yeah, so with burns, one of the things to watch out, particularly with at the moment, one of the major causes of burns, in fact, is actually the Child Accident Prevention Week this week. And one of the main causes of burns among the under fives is hot drinks. Because we live in a coffee shop culture. Admittedly, we can't sit in a coffee shop at the moment, but we have drinks at home, etc. And if, for example, you drink fruit tea, or even tea or coffee with milk in, is that the temperature is hugely high. And if you've got that mug just on the side, little ones want to grab hold of it. So you need to make sure handles are turned away and you keep it safe. If a child is burnt, you have to get the burnt bit of their body, and only that bit of their body, under cold running water for at least 20 minutes. We've got some really good YouTube videos actually at the moment that children can watch, so they understand a little bit more about it on our Mini First Aid YouTube channel, where they can actually see how burns are treated. But that 20 minutes, it seems like ages, and babies will cry, but that takes the burn out of the skin, so it stops that active burning taking place. And then you cover with cling film, and you seek medical advice. Don't put any lotions or potions on a burn.
We have got a question that gave me a little bit of a heart attack when I first read it, but I find it impossible to keep toddler to stay underwater for 15 to 20 minutes. Then realize they're talking about a burn being underwater, not the whole child.
Yeah, right, yes, you will. It's going to take your best distraction techniques. One of the things I think is important to know is that for that 15 to 20 minutes, the first couple of minutes are the most painful under cold water. If you've ever had to hold your finger under cold water after you've burnt it on the oven, you do it for a couple of minutes and you're like, oh, it's going numb, it's really sore. But actually, once it goes numb, you can't feel it anymore. And so actually, if you can persevere with them, singing, sweets, whatever you've got to do, best cuddle. But I think it's also really important to emphasize that no child has died from crying. And as much as it goes against mother nature, human nature, to want to make your child cry, the outcome from a burn is so significantly better if they've had that 20 minutes under cold water, as in there can be no scarring at all. So it's really, really important if you go with it, even if they don't forgive you for a few days afterwards.
Thank you, that's really great advice. We've got lots of thank yous. We've got somebody asking where will this be so we can watch it again. It will be back on our website. We need to download it from Zoom and then get it uploaded to the website. So in the next day or so, it will be available on the website where you found the link to this one. Feel free to watch it again, absolutely. Lots and lots of thank yous, really, really helpful. Someone is interested in the baby proofing course. Is this online? Is baby proofing covered?
Yes, if you message through the website, what happens is if you go onto our website, you put in your postcode and that will link you straight away to your local trainer, and you can then message them directly, or you can look at the courses that are available, and they are running baby proofing courses on Zoom. So they are available. And also if you want to get together with a group of friends now to do the Zoom first aid course in full, where you'll get to use with equipment at home, so we get you working with cushions and all sorts of things and having a go at practical dealing with burns, etc. And our prices are from £20. So we say at the moment, particularly everyone's eating a lot of takeaway, it's the price of a takeaway. So it's a great investment and it just gives you that peace of mind.
It's brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. It's been really, really useful today. But lots of thank you comments, and we really appreciate you coming on. So people can get in touch with you through your social channels?
Yes, at Mini First Aid is our Instagram and Facebook. And if you visit the website, you can also subscribe to the newsletter. Every week we send out, because first aid is such a big subject, and there's also extra things, seasonal things, sunburn, insect bites, all sorts of things. So we also send out a weekly newsletter, which gives you more first aid tips, which you can sign up for, and that tells you a little bit more about what we're up to. Fantastic.
Thank you again so much.
Pleasure.
We do have more Zoom sessions coming, or more live sessions tomorrow. We have the lovely Tori back again doing some sessions, some activities in the bath. So we'll be on Facebook at 2 o'clock tomorrow. So please come and join us for that. And then on Saturday, we've got a midwife from Tommy's on our Instagram feed. So please come along and join those. And then we've got a whole nother week of exciting activity next week as well. So keep an eye on our social channels and our website for more information on that. Thank you very much everyone for coming. It's lovely to see so many people. And yeah, we hope you've enjoyed it. And thanks again to Kate.
Pleasure, no problem. Thanks, folks.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Bye.